2002. What a year this was. I have to say that this is probably, if it wasn't the worst year for whales, it was close to it. And I say that, I guess, in terms of numbers of humpbacks that we were seeing. So I'm going to start out this year not with the whales. There's going to be a lot of people in this week's Throwback Thursday. I haven't really talked very much about this. In 1998, I met a professor from Georgia named John Shell. He's probably one of the people in my adult life that has had the biggest impact on me. So we went to McTee's one night and over a beer hashed out this class that he would bring up from Georgia of master's and PhD students, and they would spend a week whale watching. And so we did that for about 10 years. He would bring up his students and they were learning about whales in their natural setting, okay? So in the context with which whales live. And then they would reflect on their experience and think about how they could take what they were teaching and teach it in context. It was just an amazing, amazing time. This was this year's interns with the George group. So really meeting him and learning about kind of the theory really inspired me to go back and get a master's and really kind of focused me on what I wanted to do. So in 2002, I finished it. And I also turned 30. So I had a really big party at the beginning of the season. It was almost the very beginning of whale watch season. So we had my brother's band played and Sarah was one of the naturalists on the boat and she was in a band. So she played too. Just a whole lot of fun because I invited everybody that I knew. I think I had 14 people crash at my house that night. And if you know that apartment on Prospect Street, it was not that big. But we had a really good time. It was a great way to start out the season. So in terms of whales, it was really quite slow. We started out with Reaper. We did have a 6 species day I saw earlier in the season. So that's humpback whales, a right whale, minke whale, fin whale, a harbor porpoise, and Atlantic white-sided dolphin. So really cool to have a 6 species day. That doesn't happen very often. The right whale we saw, I'm pretty sure is a whale named Calvin, who was born in 1992 and is kind of a favorite of many right whale scientists, I believe. We had Spoon in her calf. And the calf, I love this name. It was named Cowpoke. If you look at that little mark in the middle, it's sort of, you can make out like maybe a cowboy hat and a face and kind of a body. You have to use your imagination a little bit. So we had a lot of fin whales. Some days we actually did have like 10 to 15 fin whales. There were lots and lots around. Sometimes it took us a while to find them. As you can see by the comments, I loved reading through the data sheets because we used to write down comments about passengers. And so this was on the data sheet that day. So some days there were lots of whales and then other days there weren't as many. We did have a few days where we'd see super pods of dolphins. So like 500 dolphins, all spread out just everywhere you could see. So then in June 5th, 6th, and 7th, this major storm came through. We lost all 3 of those days. And then we went out against really crummy seas. Like we were going into this really big swell. Once we got out there, there were like 50 humpbacks on this patch of bait and they were feeding like crazy. Trigger was one of the whales that was out there, Spider, Cygnus, the usual regulars, Ember, Salt, Mars, Thread. I have no pictures of the feeding of this day. I think it was just, I remember just being so overwhelmed by seeing all of these different whales. The one thing that I remember though were the birds. There were literally just hundreds of birds all feeding on this bait. And after that, they just like clockwork. Another storm came through and the whales disappeared. And I remember we used to go to McTee's all the time those days. But I remember one of my interns came during that time that the trips were bagged after we had seen all those whales. And I remember sitting at McTee's and he was like, I can't believe I've had cheese fries before I've gotten to see any whales. And then the other thing I remember about that was being out there after that crazy week of all these whales. And the interns were collecting data and one of them was like, what happened to all the whales? I was like, shh, don't tell all the other passengers that they've missed the good time. That was the highlight of the whole year in terms of numbers of whales that we saw. That was by the middle of June, it was done. That was it. We spent most of the summer up on Jeffrey's Ledge. And so here are some of the whales from Jeffrey's that you that I haven't really talked about very much because this was the first year that I spent a significant amount of time up on Jeffries. So Shockwave is one of the whales that we saw, and Satchela, Owl, who's many people's favorites, Clamp, Flask, this whale named Cardew, who I've mentioned before. She was off. She's often with salt, and Fringe, who's another whale that we haven't seen for a few years, but she was around up there then. But then we had, it's funny because the years where there aren't a lot of humpbacks around, we tend to see other stuff. And I think there's two reasons. It could be that the humpbacks aren't there, and so other things are taking their place. But it also just could be because we're not just going to the same place every day. So we're exploring more. I mean, we were sometimes in areas, such random areas, picking up animals. There was one area, we called it the deep water, that we used to go to when we didn't know where else to go. We'd be like, well, let's head to the deep water. Maybe we'll find something out there. We had pilot whales quite a bit that summer. I think this was the first summer that I saw a sei whale, actually. And I had to put this picture in here, the Prince of Wales. I don't think I've put in a picture of that. And then the basking sharks. I do remember a day, and it must have been this year because I have this picture of a lot of them. I remember there were like, somebody had said there were like 100. By the time we got out there were like 25. But they were in rows of 5, one behind the other, all feeding. It was so cool. And then we had a blue shark one day. We see them occasionally, but this is a cool picture of one. And then Jude got this picture of a gannet. I love this picture. This is a sad one. We had a dead minke whale, but look at all the storm petrels that are around it. I think they feed on the oils. So we also had a fundraiser again that year where Roger Payne comes and talks on the microphone, and we serve food and do a big raffle and educate everybody. And it's a cool opportunity for the whole crew to get together. So lots of people came back this particular year. There were lots of crew on the boat for this fundraiser. And then I love this picture of Min Yang and Reb and Ildi and Jude with the sun on their faces. The other thing that we did that summer is we ran it wasn't really, I guess it was kind of a day camp. But we did 2 different sessions, one for younger kids. And I love this picture because one of the girls ended up being an intern years later and helping me with Whalemobile programs. And so it's so cool to see kids grow up and still be passionate about the ocean. The other was for older kids, and it was a week long, and the interns were involved in it. And we did sea kayaking and explored the beach. We did lobsters, we did whales, we did everything. We made this giant food web. It was so much fun, but every day we were exhausted at the end of the day. It was just a really fun week. We had an awesome crew that summer, despite the fact that the whales were not as plentiful. We had an awesome crew. It was really, really fun. In fact, we just got on a Zoom. Some of us a Zoom call a couple weeks ago. It was fun. We look almost the same too, don't we? It's only 20 years ago. These are just some more fun pictures of the crew. We also had our other, I don't even know, regular passengers, I guess we would call them, our favorite guests. Some from Georgia, some from the UK. They'd come up. That summer, Jude and I went up to Tadoussac to go look for beluga whales. That was pretty exciting. So once the fall hit, I think September 5th, we had a right whale. And then September 6th, Bodine called me at like 11 o'clock and he said, Mark's on a blue whale. And I was like, what? So we were so excited to go out on the boat that afternoon because we knew Mark would be out there with them until we would get out there. So I remember doing the dock talk and just being like crawling out of my skin, excited that we were going to get to go see a blue whale because I had never seen one before. And so we got out there and it was so amazing. We ended up having, I think there were 2 blue whales in the area for a couple of days. It was just amazing. And I remember, just crying as I first saw it. I couldn't even speak. And then the newspaper called us. And I remember talking to the guy on the phone when we were out there. And I was like, oh my God, it's so cool. It's so cool. And then there's the article in the paper came out and that was the title. It's so cool. And that was my naturalist perspective. And then scientists had other explanations for why they were in the area, that sort of thing. But that was a super cool sighting. So then the rest of the fall, the whales kind of did what they had done the fall before. They were into the west, closer to Gloucester. Some days we would get to the breakwater when we'd see the blows 4 or 5 miles away. Geometry was one of the whales that was out there a lot. In fact, I do remember him being out there every fall, showing up like mid-August and staying through the fall, and often being one of the only whales I could recognize. And I would get so frustrated because be all these little juveniles, and I just couldn't figure out who anybody was. But a couple that year were Wolf and Kappa, who I don't think I've really seen much of since then. And then the last really cool day that I remember was September 29th, and we were in close to shore, and it was this gorgeous flat day. And I saw this blow a couple miles away, and it was the biggest blow I'd ever seen. And I was like, Jeff, we got to go out there. So he's like, all right. And so we're steaming out there. He was like, we better get some dolphins or something like that when we get out here. And where the boat was looking this way, and I saw the whale come up looking this way, and I could see the whole body underneath the surface of the water, which meant it was light in color. If it was a fin whale, I wouldn't have been able to see that side because it was the dark side we were looking at. And so I knew it was a blue whale. It was so exciting. And I love this picture because a fin whale came up next to the blue whale. And if you look at it, I mean, the fin whale looks so tiny next to this blue whale. It was just incredible. And I also remember the blue whale pooped, and it was bright red. And I wish I had gotten a picture of it. That was one of the coolest sightings for me because I was the one that found the blue whale that day. And then the last thing so I had finished my master's, and I went to a conference out in California. It was my first American Cetacean Society conference that I had gone to. And it was the first poster I presented, which was really cool. It was a very cool experience for me to be able to present what I had created. And I love this picture. It's one of my favorite pictures that I have of these two lovely ladies. We did a whale watch as part of the pre-conference field trips. And it was up in the Pacific Northwest, so it's where the southern residents are. And all three pods had been there the day before, and we went out, and it was just this flat, calm day. We would have seen those dorsal fins that had been there, and we were out for, I think, twice as long as we should have been, and didn't see them. But we did see some minke whales. We were all like, oh, no, show us the orcas. Still a very good memory. And I think I have my rain check from that still. So while 2002 had its really cool moments, in general, the whales weren't as good this year, but the people made up for it. It was definitely one of the most memorable people years. And I think it's one of the years too that I've kept in touch with every single intern. And so for me, it was really memorable as much for the people as it was for the whales. So that was 2002. Hope you enjoyed. See you next year.